When I married Mark, I thought I was gaining a husband. I didn't realize I was also getting a mother-in-law who thought she was his wife. Things spiraled out of control when she made a shocking move to split us apart. I thought I'd hit the jackpot with Mark. He was kind, funny, and always made me feel like the most important person in the room. But there was one thing I overlooked early on: his mom, Diane. At first, she seemed sweet, always offering to help and making me feel like part of the family. But as our wedding day approached, that sweetness started to feel smothering. Diane insisted on being involved in every part of the wedding planning. I'm not talking about offering to help with flowers or suggesting her favorite cake flavors. No, Diane wanted full control. She vetoed our original venue because it wasn't classy enough, and insisted we invite distant relatives Mark hadn't seen in years because it's what family does. At first, I chalked it up to her excitement. After all, it was her only son's wedding. But then she started making comments. "Are you sure you want your hair down for the ceremony?" she'd ask, her tone dripping with fake concern. "I just think updos look more sophisticated." Or, "I noticed your family's guest list is bigger than ours. Do you think that's fair to Mark?" I gritted my teeth and let it slide for Mark's sake. He'd shrug it off, saying, "That's just mom being mom. He means well." And I wanted to believe that. But Diane's true colors came out the day after the wedding. Mark and I were on our honeymoon, staying at a cozy beach resort. I remember feeling so happy, so excited to start our life together. Then my phone buzzed. It was Diane. "Hi sweetie," she chirped. "How's my boy doing?" I laughed awkwardly, trying to brush it off. "We're great, Diane. Just enjoying the beach." "Oh, I bet he's getting sunburned." "Mark always forgets sunscreen," she said, completely ignoring the fact that I was right there with him. She launched into a series of questions. What we were eating, where we were going next, even asking if I'd remembered to pack his allergy medication. It didn't stop there. She called every single day. Once, when we didn't answer, she left a voicemail, her voice trembling with fake worry. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay. Call me as soon as you can." I played it for Mark, expecting him to be annoyed. Instead, he sighed. "That's just mom. She gets anxious." By the end of the week, I was furious. Our honeymoon wasn't just ours anymore. It felt like Diane was there, looming over us. And then, on our last night, she pulled the ultimate move. We were at dinner, enjoying a rare moment of peace, when Mark's phone rang. It was Diane. He hesitated but eventually picked up, and I watched his face turn pale. "Mom, what are you doing here?" he stammered. I nearly choked on my drink. He was here? At our honeymoon resort? Diane had booked a room for herself, just in case we needed anything. That's when I realized this wasn't just about being a caring mom. Diane wasn't going to let go of Mark, or let me have him without a fight. After the honeymoon, I was determined to start fresh. Maybe Diane had just been overly emotional because Mark was her only child and the wedding was a big transition. I told myself things would calm down once we settled into married life. But I couldn't have been more wrong. It started innocently enough, or so I thought. Diane would drop by unannounced, always with an excuse. "I was in the neighborhood," she'd say, holding a casserole dish. At first I didn't mind. Who doesn't love free food? But then it became clear these weren't just friendly visits. Diane treated our home like it was hers. She'd walk right in, commenting on everything. "Oh," she said one day, running her fingers along the edge of our coffee table, "it's a little dusty, don't you think? You really need to stay on top of that." I forced a smile, biting back a sharp reply. Mark was in the kitchen, oblivious, and I didn't want to cause a scene. But the next day, Diane took it a step further. I came home from work to find her in our living room, rearranging the furniture. She had pushed the couch to the other side of the room, claiming it flowed better with the space. My favorite throw pillows were gone, replaced with some gaudy floral ones she'd brought over without asking. "Diane, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Oh, sweetie," she said, not even looking up. "I just thought I'd help you make this place feel more like a home. You'll thank me later." I was fuming. This wasn't her home, it was ours. I waited until she left to confront Mark, hoping he'd back me up. But when I explained what happened, he shrugged. "She's just trying to help," he said. "It's not a big deal." Not a big deal. I couldn't believe he didn't see the problem. But it wasn't just about the furniture. Diane wasn't trying to help. She was trying to control. And things only got worse from there. One Saturday, I was looking forward to a quiet morning with Mark. We'd planned to make breakfast together and relax for once. But at 8 a.m. sharp, Diane showed up with bags of groceries and an announcement. "I'm here to cook you a proper breakfast." Before I could even respond, she was in my kitchen, rearranging the spice rack and clucking her tongue at my cheap pans. I pulled Mark aside, my frustration boiling over. "She can't keep doing this," I hissed. "This is our home, not hers." But instead of standing by me, Mark sighed. "She's just trying to be nice. You're overreacting." I felt like I was losing my mind. Every time I tried to set a boundary, Diane pushed right through it and Mark let her. And the more she got away with, the bolder she became. The breaking point came a few weeks later. I was hosting a small dinner for friends, just 6 of us, nothing fancy. I had planned the menu, cleaned the house, and was proud of how everything was coming together. But an hour before the guests arrived, Diane showed up. "Oh good," she said, breezing past me with a tray of her own appetizers. "I knew you'd need some extra help." I tried to stop her, but she was already in the kitchen, criticizing everything from my choice of wine to the way I was plating the salad. By the time the guests arrived, I was so frazzled I could barely enjoy the evening. And Diane? She charmed everyone, acting like she was the gracious host. That night, as I cleaned up the dishes she'd insisted on helping with, leaving my kitchen a mess, I realized this wasn't just Diane being Diane. She was testing how far she could push me. And if Mark didn't step up, I wasn't sure how much more I could take. I was at my breaking point. Diane's unannounced visits, constant meddling, and subtle jabs had turned our home into a battlefield, and I felt like I was losing. No matter how many times I tried to talk to Mark, he always came to the same conclusion. She's just trying to help. But what Diane did next made it impossible to ignore. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon. Mark and I were finally spending some time together, lounging on the couch and watching a movie. For once, it felt like the Diane drama was behind us. That peace shattered when Mark's phone buzzed. He picked it up and his face immediately changed. "What is it?" I asked. "It's my mom," he said hesitantly. "What does she want now?" I tried to keep my voice neutral, but I could feel my patience slipping. Mark turned the phone toward me. It was a text from Diane. "Mark, I'm worried about you. I don't think she's the right person for you. You deserve someone who truly understands you. Call me." My stomach dropped. I'd known she didn't like me, but this was something else. She wasn't just interfering, she was actively trying to sabotage our marriage. "Mark," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady, "do you see what she's doing?" "She doesn't mean it like that," he said, but his voice wavered. "Mark, she's trying to turn you against me. This isn't about her being helpful anymore. It's about control." For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in his eyes. But he still didn't want to confront her. That's when I realized I had to make a choice. "Listen," I said firmly, "I love you, but I can't keep living like this. Either we set boundaries with your mom or," I paused, choking on the words, "or I don't know if I can stay." Mark's eyes widened. "You don't mean that." "I do," I said, my voice trembling. "I married you, not her. And right now it feels like there are 3 people in this marriage. If you can't stand up to her, this is never going to work." There was a long silence. Mark sat there staring at his hands. I could see the conflict in his face, torn between his loyalty to his mom and his love for me. Finally he nodded. "I'll talk to her," he said. I wanted to feel relieved, but part of me was still skeptical. Would he really stand up to her? Or would this be another empty promise? I knew that if things didn't change, I'd have to follow through on my ultimatum. And that thought terrified me. Mark said he'd talk to Diane, but I wasn't holding my breath. He'd promised to stand up to her before, only to brush things under the rug when it got too uncomfortable. This time, though, something felt different. Maybe it was the fear of losing our marriage, or maybe he'd finally seen how far Diane was willing to go. Either way, I held my breath as he made the call. I sat on the edge of the couch, listening to his side of the conversation. "Mom," he began, his voice steady but firm, "we need to talk." There was a long pause, and I could faintly hear Diane's voice on the other end. She sounded surprised, offended even. "I've been letting this go on for too long," Mark continued. You've crossed too many boundaries and it's not fair to narrator, or to me. This is our marriage and you need to respect that. The color drained from Mark's face as Diane's voice grew louder, her words indistinct but clearly heated. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. I'm serious, Mom, he said. If you can't respect our boundaries, we'll have to take a step back. I couldn't hear what Diane said next, but it must have been bad because Mark's jaw clenched. No, Mom, this isn't her fault. Stop blaming, narrator. This is about your behavior, not hers. When he finally hung up, he looked exhausted. She's not happy, he said, slumping onto the couch beside me. What did she say? I asked, bracing myself. A lot of things I don't want to repeat, he admitted. But I told her things have to change. No more unannounced visits, no more meddling, and definitely no more trying to come between us. If she can't handle that, then we'll have to go low contact. It was a small victory, but it didn't feel like one. Not yet. Diane didn't take rejection lightly, and I knew this wouldn't be the last we'd hear from her. Sure enough, the next week, Diane showed up at our house unannounced, pretending nothing had happened. She walked in like she owned the place, holding a basket of baked goods. Mom, Mark said firmly, meeting her at the door, you need to leave. We talked about this. Diane froze, a look of shock and hurt crossing her face. Mark, don't be ridiculous. I just wanted to bring you something. I'm not being ridiculous, he said, his voice calm but unwavering. We agreed, no unannounced visits. You need to go. She looked at him, then at me, her eyes narrowing. I see how it is, she spat, her voice icy. She's turned you against me. No, Mom, Mark said, standing his ground. I made this decision because I love my wife and I want our marriage to work. Please respect that. Diane hesitated, then turned on her heel and left without another word. The silence she left behind felt heavy, but for the first time in months, it also felt like a weight had been lifted. Later that night, Mark and I talked about what had happened. He admitted it was harder than he'd expected but said he was committed to putting our marriage first. We even agreed to start therapy together to strengthen our relationship and learn how to handle Diane as a united front. The next few weeks were tense. Diane tried to reach out, leaving passive-aggressive voicemails and sending guilt-tripping texts. But Mark stayed firm and I finally felt like we were on the same team. We're not completely out of the woods yet. Diane is still Diane and I don't think she'll ever fully change. But for now, we've reclaimed our marriage and that feels like a victory worth celebrating. Have you ever had to stand up to a difficult in-law? What would you have done in this situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a moment of the drama.